Welcome back to Study Hall, where we like to take those everyday things you never really think about and we'll give them the deep dive they deserve.
I like that. I like that.
And today we are tackling a question that you might have pondered maybe while you're getting ready in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
Why is it generally expected for women to shave their legs and armpits, but not men?
It's one of those really fascinating cultural quirks. You know, when you start digging, you realize it reveals a whole lot about history and beauty standards and even a bit of marketing manipulation.
Oh, yeah. The sources you sent over for this deep dive had me raising my eyebrows a few times.
Oh, really?
To start us off, we've got articles spanning, from ancient history all the way up to modern trends.
Yeah.
And let me tell you the story of hair removal. It's not as straightforward as you might think.
Exactly. It's easy to assume that this is a modern obsession, but we actually find examples of people valuing smooth skin going way, way back.
Okay, so spill the historical tea. Where do we even begin with this hairy situation?
So believe it or not, ancient civilizations like those in Egypt, Greece, and Rome, they had their own methods for achieving that hairless look.
Seriously. I always picture those togas like flowing over some seriously hairy legs.
Not necessarily. While their, fashion choices might have hidden it sometimes, smooth skin was definitely considered a desirable trait. But here's the key difference. It wasn't about gender back then.
So it wasn't a case of women being expected to be smooth while men just kind of roamed free.
Precisely. So in ancient Rome, for example, bathhouses would offer hair removal services for both men and women. It was more about social status and having the time and resources for these kinds of beauty practices.
So hair removal as a status symbol. Kind of like having the latest iPhone today.
That's a great analogy. If you could afford to be hairless, it showed that you had a certain level of wealth and leisure. It wasn't tied to any particular gender role.
Okay. That definitely flips the script on my assumptions. So when did this whole hair removal thing become a women-only expectation?
Well, let's fast forward a bit to medieval Europe. And interestingly, body hair basically took a backseat during this period. It wasn't that people suddenly, embraced hairiness. It was more about fashion trends.
Were they rocking those full-body suits of armor even off the battlefield?
Not quite. But their clothing was much more modest, and it covered a larger portion of the body compared to earlier eras. So with those long skirts and sleeves, head coverings, body hair was essentially out of sight, out of mind.
So it became a non-issue because no one was seeing it anyway.
Yeah, and this was further reinforced by the religious teachings that were prevalent at the time. So Christianity, with its emphasis on modesty, downplayed the importance of physical appearance in general. Body hair was just part of being human.
But I have a feeling this era of body hair peace didn't last forever. When did things start to shift again?
The early 20th century marked a turning point. As hemlines rose and sleeveless dresses came into vogue, women's body hair was suddenly on display again.
And I'm guessing that's when the marketing machine saw its opportunity.
Exactly. It was a perfect storm, really. Fashion was changing, and companies were eager to capitalize on these emerging beauty trends.
Okay, so give us the rundown. How did this marketing blitz play out?
Well, one of our sources is a 1915 issue of Harper's Bazaar. It was a major fashion magazine at the time, and they ran an ad encouraging women to remove their underarm hair. They were claiming it was unsightly and unfashionable with the new sleeveless styles.
Talk about setting the stage for decades of insecurity.
Right. And razor companies were quick to jump on the bandwagon. They started producing razors specifically marketed to women with campaigns that played heavily on societal expectations and insecurities.
I'm picturing those old-timey ads, with the dramatic music and women fainting at the sight of a stray hair.
You're not far off. They used language like unfeminine and unsightly to describe women's body hair, creating a stigma that hadn't really existed before. Hair removal was suddenly framed as essential for any modern desirable woman.
It's amazing how powerful marketing can be in shaping our perceptions of what's normal or acceptable.
Absolutely. And this was just the beginning. World War II, believe it or not, also played a role in solidifying this expectation for women to shave.
Okay, now that's a curveball I did not see coming.
Yeah.
How did a world war factor into women's grooming habits?
Well, during the war, nylon stockings became scarce due to rationing. And women were suddenly faced with this dilemma. how to maintain the fashionable look of smooth, stocking-clad legs.
I'm all ears because I can't imagine them just throwing in the towel on fashion.
They didn't. Many women turned to shaving their legs as a way to mimic the look of stockings. Some even resorted to using makeup to create the illusion of that nylon sheen.
Wow, that's some serious dedication to fashion. So even wartime shortages played a role in making leg shaving a more common practice.
They absolutely did. And to add fuel to the fire, Hollywood entered the scene. The glamorous movie stars of the 1930s and 40s, with their flawless skin and impeccable grooming, became the ultimate beauty ideal.
The golden age of Hollywood, where every hair was perfectly in place.
Exactly. And with the rise of mass media, from magazines to movies to, the emerging television, this image of the perfectly groomed woman was constantly reinforced. Hair removal was no longer just about fashion. It became deeply tied to fitting in and achieving a certain standard of beauty. And welcome back to Study Hall. Before the break, we were tracing the evolution of hair removal and how, historical events, fashion trends, and these marketing campaigns really pushed it into the mainstream for women.
Yeah, it's amazing how something, as seemingly simple as body hair can be influenced by so many different factors.
Absolutely. And what's really fascinating is that these trends often reflect these deeper, societal norms and values.
Okay, so let's dig into that. We've established that marketing played a role.
Mm.
But what were the underlying societal forces at play here?
Well, think about the qualities that are traditionally associated with femininity. Smoothness, softness, youthfulness, even a certain kind of purity. These ideals were constantly being reinforced through various forms of media and cultural messaging.
So women were essentially being told that they needed to embody these almost, I don't know, childlike qualities in order to be considered attractive.
In many ways, yes. And body hair, which is a natural part of growing up and maturing, simply didn't fit into that picture.
Yeah, it's like they were trying to erase any trace of women's natural adult bodies.
Exactly. And these expectations were often rooted in, patriarchal ideas about women's roles in society.
Right. A woman's worth was often, unfortunately sometimes still is, judged based on her appearance and her ability to conform to these, narrow beauty standards.
Precisely. And hair removal became another way for women to control their bodies and manage their appearance in a way that was deemed socially acceptable.
Yeah. It's interesting how this all ties into the concept of control, both societal control and personal control.
It does. On one hand, you have these societal pressures dictating what's considered beautiful and acceptable for women. On the other hand, you have women internalizing those messages and engaging in these practices, to exert some level of agency over their own bodies and how they present themselves to the world.
So it's like this complex mix of feeling pressured to conform while also trying to navigate those pressures in a way that feels, I don't know, maybe empowering.
Exactly. It's not always a black and white issue.
And meanwhile, men were essentially given a free pass on all of this.
Yeah.
No marketing campaigns telling them to shave, no societal pressure to conform to a hairless ideal.
Right. In fact, men's body hair was often viewed as a sign of masculinity, strength, and ruggedness.
Talk about a double standard. Society was basically saying, men, be your natural selves. Women, change your bodies to fit this mold.
It was a pretty stark contrast, and those messages were pervasive in all aspects of life.
So this pressure wasn't just coming from advertising. It was reinforced within families, social circles, everywhere.
Absolutely. It became woven into the fabric of society. And what's even more interesting is how hair removal was often linked to hygiene.
Oh, tell me more about that. I'm curious how they managed to, connect those two things.
Well, some of the early marketing campaigns actually framed body hair as being unclean or unhygienic.
Seriously, that seems like a real stretch.
It was a tactic, really, designed to further shame women into shaving. They were tapping into societal anxieties about cleanliness and respectability.
So it wasn't just about being unattractive. It was about being perceived as, dirty or improper if you didn't remove your body hair.
Exactly. It created this idea that women's bodies were somehow inherently problematic and in need of constant maintenance and control.
Wow. It's kind of disturbing when you think about the implications of that messaging.
It is. And it's important to acknowledge the impact those messages have had on generations of women.
But thankfully, it seems like things are starting to shift. We're seeing more body hair positivity and a wider range of beauty standards being celebrated these days.
Absolutely. There's definitely a growing movement challenging those those rigid norms, and embracing body hair as a natural and normal part of being human.
Thank goodness for that.
Right. It's a positive sign that these conversations are happening and that people are questioning those long-held assumptions about what's considered beautiful.
And I think it's important to acknowledge the role that media and representation play in all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing more diverse images of beauty, including body hair, can really help normalize those choices and challenge those outdated norms.
Couldn't agree more. The more we see people embracing their natural bodies, the less power those narrow beauty standards hold.
For sure. We need more celebrities, influencers, and everyday people rocking their body hair with confidence.
Exactly. It's about expanding our definition of beauty and recognizing that there's no one right way to look. And it's about sending a message that our bodies are inherently worthy regardless of whether we choose to remove our body hair or not.
Well said. So we've talked about the historical context, the marketing tactics, the gendered expectations, and the push for change. But there's another layer to this body hair conversation that I think is worth exploring. The environmental and ethical implications.
You're absolutely right. It's easy to get caught up in the societal and cultural aspects, but we can't ignore the impact that our grooming choices have on the planet and on our own bodies.
Okay, so let's talk about that. What are some of the environmental and ethical concerns surrounding hair removal?
Well, for starters, many traditional hair removal methods generate a lot of waste. Think about all those disposable razors and plastic packaging ending up in landfills.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's easy to overlook the cumulative impact of something as small as a razor, but it all adds up.
Exactly. And then there's the energy consumption associated, manufacturing, transporting, and disposing of these products. It's not insignificant.
Definitely something to consider. And what about the ethical concerns? Are there any issues related to how these products are made or the ingredients that are used?
There are definitely ethical considerations we should be thinking about. For instance, some hair removal products contain ingredients that are sourced in ways that can harm the environment or exploit workers.
So it's not just about the individual consumer's choice. It's about being aware of the larger systems and supply chains involved.
Absolutely. We need to be conscious consumers and make informed choices that align with our values.
So given these environmental and ethical concerns, what can we do to make more responsible choices when it comes to hair removal?
There are a few things to consider. First, we can try to reduce our consumption. Do we really need to remove hair as often as we do? Could we embrace a bit of stubble, maybe? Or perhaps explore longer-lasting hair removal methods to cut down on waste?
Those are great suggestions. I know I'm personally trying to be more mindful of how often I reach for the razor.
And there are also more sustainable products on the market these days. We're seeing reusable razors, biodegradable wax strips, and products made with natural plant-based ingredients.
It's encouraging to see companies innovating in that direction.
It is. So doing your research, reading labels, and supporting companies that prioritize sustainability can make a difference.
Great advice. And sometimes the most ethical and sustainable choice might be to simply, embrace your natural body hair.
I think you're right. It's about reclaiming our bodies and making choices that feel right for us, both personally and ethically.
Absolutely. It's about challenging those societal pressures and saying, this is my body and I get to decide what I do with it.
Beautifully said. And that's a powerful message to send to the world. We don't need to conform to, arbitrary beauty standards. We can define beauty for ourselves.
It's about recognizing that all bodies are worthy of respect and admiration, whether they're hairy or hairless, perfectly smooth, or a little bit stubbly.
Well, this has been a thought-provoking conversation, and I think we've covered a lot of ground. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Intrigued? What's on your mind? Okay, lay that final thought on us. What's the big takeaway here?
Well, we've talked a lot about the societal pressures women face when it comes to body hair. But, as we hopefully move towards a more inclusive and accepting society, what do you think the future holds for men and their grooming choices?
Ooh, that's a good one. It makes you wonder if we'll see, a similar shift in expectations for men. Will body hair become less of a defining characteristic of masculinity?
It's definitely something to ponder as these conversations about, body image and societal norms evolve. It'll be interesting to see how those expectations shift for everyone, regardless of gender.
Absolutely. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the curious case of women shaving.
Yeah, I agree. It's been a fascinating journey through history, marketing, and, evolving cultural attitudes.
We've uncovered some surprising facts and hopefully sparked some critical thinking about something we often take for granted.
And remember, whether you choose to embrace your body hair or remove it, the most important thing is that it's a choice you make for yourself, free from societal pressures.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this enlightening journey, and be sure to tune in next time for another deep dive into the everyday things that make you say, huh, I never thought about it that way before.